I swallowed it down and opened the fridge. I made dinner for two without really thinking about it. Habit. Pasta. A simple sauce. Salad. I plated everything and set it on the table. Then I told myself I'd bring a portion to Liam's door and eat in the living room with the TV on, like some kind of shield. I didn't have to go find him. He walked in on his own. "Smells good," he said softly. I looked up and my heart stuttered. He'd grown in the months since that night, just a little, barely noticeable if you didn't see him every day. His shoulders had filled out. His jaw was sharper. There was stubble on his chin he hadn't bothered to shave yet. "Thanks," I replied, too quickly. "You hungry?" He nodded and sat down at his usual place. We ate in a strained quiet. Forks against plates, the occasional comment about the day. He mentioned a class project. I mentioned a broken washing machine at work. Small talk, safe topics, like we were people who had never shared anything but air dot at some point. My hand brushed the edge of my glass, tipping it. Water spilled across the table, running toward his side. "Sorry," I blurted, reaching for napkins. "It's fine," he said at the same time. Grabbing his own, our fingers collided in the middle, both of us reaching for the same sodden square of paper. It was such a harmless, ordinary, sitcom kind of moment that it should have been nothing, but our eyes met that, and for the first time since that night, neither of us looked away immediately. There was no lust in his gaze, nothing crude. But there was heat. There was a question. There was something like pain. My throat went dry. We cleaned up the spill and sat back down like civilized people. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. "Can we talk?" He asked suddenly, his voice low. 1,000 answers raced through my mind. "No. Later." "About what?" "Sure. Only if it's about your classes, your friends, anything but that night." "Okay," I said. He pushed his plate away, barely touched. His leg bounced under the table, restless. "That night," he began, and I knew exactly which one he meant. "In the kitchen." I felt the world tilt again, same as it had been. "It was a mistake," I said quickly. "Too quickly?" "I was tired." "You were tired." "It was confusing." "I shouldn't have." "I know," he cut in. Silence stretched between us, painful and taut. "I know you're with my dad," he said, staring at his hands. "I know it was wrong. I know all the reasons why it shouldn't have happened." I opened my mouth and closed it again. He exhaled shakily. "I need you to know I didn't mean to make things weird for you. Or dangerous. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I felt different since then. About you. About myself. About this house." He finally looked up, and there it was. Everything I'd been trying not to name reflected back at me. "I don't think of you like a mother," he said quietly. "I never really did." And that night, I think something shifted in my head that I can't shift back. I keep trying, but his voice broke. Guilt flooded me so fast I felt dizzy. "Liam," I whispered. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have put you in that position. It was my job to keep those lines clear, and I failed." He shook his head. "It wasn't just you. I knew what I was doing when I stepped closer. I knew what it might mean. I could have laughed it off. I didn't." His honesty cut through every lie I'd been nursing to protect myself. I wanted to reach across the table and take his hand. I wanted to tell him he was good, that he wasn't broken for feeling what he felt, that it was my responsibility, not his. I didn't touch him. "Listen to me," I said, forcing my voice steady. "You are not responsible for my loneliness. You're not responsible for the cracks in my marriage. You're not responsible for the way I responded that night. You were a 19-year-old kid in a house that didn't know how to love you properly. I was the adult. I was the one who should have known better." "Stop calling me a kid," he said softly. "Not angry. just heard. I know I'm younger. I know I'm your husband's son. But that night, I didn't feel like a kid. I felt like someone you wanted. The word sliced through me, Dot, because he was right. In that suspended second, I had wanted him not as a son, not as a boy I'd helped raise, but as a man who saw me. I did want you, I said, the confession tasting like metal on my tongue. And that was wrong. His breath hitched. The wanting isn't wrong by itself, he said, almost as if he was trying to convince himself. We can't control what shows up, right? It's what we do with it that matters. I closed my eyes. He was giving me an out. He was telling me in his own stumbling, earnest way that even if our feelings were twisted and misplaced, we could choose not to act on them. That we could plant a fence where the line used to be. When I opened my eyes, mine flooded with tears I didn't bother to hide. I saw my own heart mirrored in his rash, confused, needy, terrified. We are never going to do anything like that again, I said. I needed to say it out loud. For him. For me, Dot, he nodded slowly. We need to give each other space, I continued. Real space. Not just walking around the tension. You deserve a life that isn't tangled up in my mistakes. You should be somewhere you're not constantly reminded of that night. His brows drew together. Are you asking me to leave? The very thought made my chest ache, but I forced myself to nod. You were talking about that art school in the city, I reminded him. The one you said you'd never get into. The one you never actually applied to. He looked startled. You remember that? Of course I remember, I said. You lit up when you talked about it. More than I've seen you light up about anything in a long time. He stared at the table, the muscles in his jaw working. What if I don't get in? He muttered. Then you don't get in, I replied. And we figure out something else. But you have to try, Liam, not just because of what happened between us, but because you deserve a life where you're not always waiting for something to change in this house. You could leave, he said suddenly, looking up. You could walk away from him. From this. The room seemed to tilt again. A different kind of edge. I could, I said honestly. And maybe I should have a long time ago. But right now, tonight, the first thing we need to do is protect you. You're the one still becoming whoever you're going to be. I'm the one who's already halfway through the story, realizing I took the wrong turn ages back. That's not true, he said fiercely. You still have time to make different choices, I finished for him. I know, and I will. But this one is about you. We stared at each other for a long moment, the gravity of what we were saying settling between us. Apply, I whispered. Please. He swallowed hard and nodded. Okay, he said. I'll try. We didn't hug. We didn't reach across the table. We just sat there. Two people who had touched something dangerous and were now trying, clumsily, to build a fence around it. Dot, he applied. He got in. The day the acceptance letter arrived, he burst into the kitchen with a look on his face I hadn't seen in years, pure, unfiltered joy. He held the envelope out to me with trembling hands, and for a heartbeat, I forgot everything. I forgot the night in the kitchen. I forgot my guilt. I saw only this. A young man standing on the edge of his own future. Light pouring out of him. You did it, I breathed. Pulling the letter closer to read it again, even though he'd already recited the important part out loud. Liam, you did it. He laughed, slightly hysterical. I don't even know how. I was sure I'd bombed the portfolio review. Maybe the world finally saw what I've seen every time I walked past your door, I said. His eyes softened. Ethan was thrilled in his own practical way. Proud, excited, already doing the math for tuition and housing. He asked about dates and forms and deadlines. His voice booming through the living room as he paced. Phone in hand, talking to the registrar. He never once. Wondered why I excused myself halfway through the conversation to sit alone in the bathroom and cry quietly into a hand towel. The fall came and we packed Liam's things into boxes. I folded each sketch carefully, helping him decide what to take and what to leave. Our hands brushed over paper and cardboard, but this time the contact didn't sizzle. It ached Dot on the day he left. He stood in the driveway, backpack slung over one shoulder, keys in hand. Ethan hugged him, clapping his back, telling him to knock their socks off at that fancy school. He threw in a joke about not forgetting to call, about sending laundry home. It was the kind of sloppy, broad affection that used to make Liam stiffen. This time, he hugged his father back with a sincerity that made my throat close. Then he turned to me. For a second, I didn't know what to do. What was the appropriate gesture between us? A wave? A handshake? A quick perfunctory hug? He saved me from having to decide. "Thank you," he said. Just that, but the weight behind it was enormous. For what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. For seeing me, he replied. The words hit like a stone tossed into deep water. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. "Go," I managed. "Be everything." He stepped forward, hesitated just long enough for me to nod, and then wrapped his arms around me in a hug that was careful and brief and infinitely gentle. There was no heat in it. No question, just gratitude. And something I couldn't quite name. When he let go, he stepped back quickly, wiped at his eyes with his sleeve, and got into his car. I watched him drive away until the taillights disappeared. That night, the house was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No music drifting under his door. No scratch of pencil. No footsteps padding down the hallway at 2 a.m. Just Ethan in the living room, half watching a show. Just me in the kitchen, standing in the same spot where I'd once held out my hand and changed the course of 2 lives. I made cookies. I did it slowly, deliberately. Measured each ingredient, cracked each egg with care. I mixed until the dough was smooth and familiar. When it was time to taste test, I scooped a little bit onto a spoon and put it in my own mouth. Sweet, soft, simple. I pulled the tray from the oven right on time. They didn't burn. Months slipped by. Then a year. Liam called occasionally, his voice sounding older each time. He talked about assignments, about late-night painting sessions, about a professor who pushed him to draw in ways that scared him. He talked about the city, about noisy neighbors, about the strange thrill of anonymity. He never mentioned that night. Neither did I. Ethan, and I grew more distant, then finally honest. Not about Liam, never about that, but about everything else. About the way we'd become 2 people living side by side instead of together. About the way we'd both been unconsciously waiting for the other to be the one to say it out loud. In the end, we separated quietly. No screaming. No affair to blame. Just a shared recognition that whatever we had tried to build together had cracked beyond repair a long time ago. And we'd been standing in the rubble, pretending it was still a house. I moved into a small apartment with creaky floorboards and thin walls. For the first time in years, every object in the place belonged to me. Every choice, the rug, the dishes, the color of the throw blanket was mine. There were nights I lay awake and wondered if I had ruined my life. If my entire midlife unraveling could be traced back to a bowl of cookie dough and a moment of weakness. But there were other nights, too. Nights when I felt a fragile, unfamiliar sense of rightness settling into my bones. I'd sit by the window with a cup of tea, listening to the distant sounds of my new neighborhood, and realize I could breathe without feeling like I was stealing air from someone else's lungs. One afternoon, nearly 2 years after Liam left for school, I opened my mailbox and found a postcard. The front was a photo of a gallery wall filled with drawings. The back was covered in his messy handwriting. They used one of my pieces in a group show. The message read, thought you'd like to see. Thank you for pushing me to apply, even if it hurt. I'm still figuring myself out. I hope you are too. There was no signature. There didn't need to be one. I held that card in my hands for a long time. Why femme tracing the corners. Some stories are easy to categorize. They have villains and heroes, clear victims and clear perpetrators. They have tidy morals you can stitch onto a throw pillow. This isn't one of those stories. This is a story about hunger, about boundaries that blur in the dark, about the mistakes you make when you let yourself go starving for too long, starving for warmth, for touch, for validation, and the way that hunger can make you dangerous to people who trust you. It's also a story about choice, because in that kitchen, there was a moment when the path between us could have gone in a far worse direction. We could have leaned into the crack instead of stepping back from it. We could have turned a fleeting, forbidden spark into something that would have scorched us all. We DIDN single quotes T dot. We failed in some ways. We reached for the wrong thing. We let a line disappear. But then slowly, painfully, we drew new ones. If you're listening to this and feeling a flicker of recognition in your chest, if there's someone in your life you're looking at with a restless kind of ache you're afraid to name, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to tell you that desire doesn't always walk in wearing a bright warning label. Sometimes it arrives dressed up as concern, as companionship, as kindness. Sometimes it tastes like something small and sweet on your fingers. It's easy to confuse the need to feel alive with love itself, but you always have a choice about what you do next. You can let that hunger steer you into places you can't come back from. Or you can sit with it, uncomfortable as it is, and decide to protect the person in front of you. Even if it means tearing yourself open a little in the process. I didn't get everything right. Far from it. But I did one thing I'm proud of. I helped Liam walk toward a life that wasn't built around my emptiness. I'm still learning how to fill that emptiness without using other people as plaster. Maybe you're learning too.